Hello, everyone. We'll give a minute for folks to get on today before we get rolling. All right. This is our 24th edition of the NIFA Food and Nutrition Security webinar series. And I was just explaining to our colleagues how we've really viewed this series as an important way for us to kind of share what we're doing here at NIFA to contribute towards tackling food and nutrition insecurity, and really just to get to know our staff and the various ways we're going about tackling food and nutrition insecurity. And as you'll see today, our partners really play a critical role in the work we do. So very much hope you get to get some food for thought of ways you can help us and connect through funding opportunities and other resources. My name is Sheila Fleischacker. I serve as a national science liaison here at NIFA, or the National Institute for Food and Agriculture at the USDA. You'll often hear us say NIFA today, and I cover our nutrition and food safety portfolio. Before we get started today, I do want to highlight here our efforts around non-discrimination. You'll see those detailed here. And then also after I present, I'm going to put some links in the chat to help you follow along today. I also want to acknowledge a few other housekeeping items today. This webinar is being recorded, and I appreciate those who are looking for recordings for past editions. We're just a little behind getting those two prior editions on food loss and food waste and extreme weather events ADA compliant. But once we get the recordings and in compliance, we will post them to our NIFA Food and Nutrition Security webinar series page. I'll put that link in the chat once I'm done speaking. Here is our phone number. I'll put this in the chat as well. If you have any issues with Zoom support, we have that option available. And do want to encourage you that today is a webinar version. So we're not using a chat where you could actively, as participants, engage in the chat. I'll send you messages as the host, but you won't be able to use the chat. But we are taking questions. So please use the Zoom question and answer function, which is on your Zoom bar, to insert your questions or your comments, and then we'll take those after our four panelists present today. And again, as I emphasized today, we should hopefully have the slides up hopefully today on our webinar series event page for this webinar. And also in the coming weeks, we'll have the ADA compliant recorded version. Feel free, if you didn't get your questions answered today or more questions arise, feel free to reach out to me. My name is my email. I'll put that in the chat, which is sheila.fleischacker@usda.gov. So I do want to emphasize that today, sorry, I'm doing slides today too. I do want to emphasize that our webinar series is really a part of the broader efforts here at USDA around these four core priorities. One of which, again, near and dear to most of the people listening to today's heart, is tackling food and nutrition insecurity. But as we've really highlighted across this webinar series, we really work across these priorities in the work we do. And the work is really all very beneficial and has co-benefits as we work across these priorities. And those other priorities include creating more and better markets, addressing climate change through climate smart agriculture, forestry, and clean energy, and addressing racial justice, equity, opportunity, and rural prosperity. And as you'll learn today, a lot of our efforts around diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, or DEIA, really do have a workforce element support or higher education support, as we like to emphasize in our relevant program opportunities today. So today we're going to really talk through that cross priority team today. I think most of you guys joining today are well aware of what NIFA is and the key goals we have. We are an extramural funding agency within USDA's Research, Economics, and Education mission area. NIFA provides leadership and funding for programs that advance agricultural sciences, and we administer federal fundings to address agriculture issues impacting people's daily lives and the nation's future. I really do want to take a minute to highlight the team effort that it had for NIFA to really contribute to tackling food and nutrition insecurity. I've been really fortunate to work with more than 80 NIFA staff who really work across all of our institutes and offices to use research, education, and extension, as well as innovation to advance food and nutrition security. As you'll learn across this series, we invest more than $220 million in this priority area. And we have, and I'll put it in the chat, a topic page that highlights our 5 primary programs and 20 additional programs that we bring to the table to really help advance food and nutrition security. And I really do encourage you to listen to prior editions. We have deep dives on our efforts to advance tribal food sovereignty, reduce food loss and waste, promote local and regional food systems. More than 23 other editions that really highlight our relevant programs and compilations of work in this space. So again, I'll put those in the chat. And again, as I've emphasized earlier, a critical part of our work is working across NIFA's 5 priority teams. So those all align with the department's 4 priority teams, including our deeper dive, not only on diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, but also a separate priority team focused in on workforce development. So without question, I think as most of you guys know, workforce development is critical to building the pipeline within the nutritional sciences and the broader agricultural sciences needed to tackle food and nutrition insecurity. Just last week, I was at the academics for nutrition departments and program chairs joint meeting with the Council for Food Science Administrators. And one of their key areas of joint discussion across food science and nutrition department heads was the need to increase enrollment, particularly at the undergraduate level. And they had a lot of interest and questions in these programs that we're going to talk about today. So before we get started in kind of the relevant funding opportunities, I want to introduce the co-chair for NIFA's Workforce Development Priority Team. And this is Dr. Christian Tobias. Dr. Tobias serves as a national program leader in the Division of Plant Systems and Production in the Institute of Food Production and Sustainability. And in this role, he coordinates and helps strengthen plant breeding programs. And as you'll learn more about his workforce development leadership role today, I really do want you to understand his prior work before joining us here at USDA did involve close to 20 years working at the USDA Agricultural Research Service. And then prior to that, he worked in a small biotechnology company. Dr. Tobias has his PhD in plant biology from Cornell University and his Bachelor's of Science in molecular plant biology from the University of California. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tobias to this webinar series and hopefully in future editions as we learn more to work with our workforce development colleagues. Dr. Tobias?
Thanks, Sheila, for that nice introduction. And I want to say that although workforce development is not a stated USDA priority, a skilled, productive, and adaptive workforce in food, agriculture, natural resources, and human sciences is, or FANH. Next slide. You can go ahead and advance the slide if you don't mind. So FANH, a workforce, is in everyone's interest, and it's a precious natural resource. Because of this, workforce development really cuts across all 4 of NIFA's institutes. And we have members in our team across the agency. And as you'll see soon, there's a particular focus within the Institute of Youth, Family, and Community. But the workforce development priority team's objectives are really to secure our future ability to adapt to and confront challenges within these areas and maintain the human capital that's required by industry, academia, and government. And long term, we want to increase the effectiveness of workforce and education development efforts within NIFA's existing organization, as well as raise awareness of some great career opportunities in these areas and help dispel some common misconceptions, particularly about agricultural careers and the opportunities there. And then last, the objective really, because it's workforce development is such a large area, we want to work with other departments and agencies in the executive branch, such as the Department of Labor, USDA Rural Development, and the White House to leverage and coordinate efforts, as well as with our partners. Next slide. Okay, you got that? Great. So the team's focus is around, 4 broad thematic areas. Opportunities and outreach really is communicating NIFA's view of workforce development, comparing NIFA's current efforts with existing successful efforts within other federal agencies, and supporting our current and potential new stakeholders that we collaborate with and that are using NIFA's resources and programs. The evaluation and impact component is all about analyzing our current and potential impacts of NIFA's investments in workforce development and developing better ways to monitor and assess NIFA's investments and improve data collection around the workforce development component. Education and skill development theme involves identifying and analyzing potential barriers preventing youth from entering careers in this area. What are their motivators? As well as identifying pathways to support and stimulate youth and early career professionals to advance and to stay in the field. The NIFA intern experience is really how we run our own in-house intern programs and provide students that we host with very enriching developmental experiences. And this includes identifying and training mentors and working with our internal programs such as Pathways program, Presidential Management Fellows, 1890 Scholars, and Tribal Scholars, as well as partners like the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, Thurgood Marshall College Fund Intern Program, and others to bring in young people that are getting their first workforce experience. And hopefully all this will lead to some useful deliverables and positive outcomes, which are listed. And I'll just leave it there and I'll kick it back over to Sheila now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tobias, for your leadership on workforce development to really help share with our attendees our broader agency efforts in this area. Dr. Tobias is going to stay on today for questions, so feel free to use the Zoom QA to put any questions you might have about our agency broader efforts here in workforce development, and then he'll be on later today to take them. Now I have the ability to introduce Dr. Michelle Shelsky Santos, who's a national program leader with the Division of Community and Education within our Institute for Youth, Family, and Community. As you'll learn today, Dr. Michelle Shelsky Santos' focus is on undergraduate educational grant programs, and that includes our research and extension experiences for undergraduates and capacity building grants for non-land grant colleges of agricultural programs. Prior to joining us here at NIFA, Michelle conducted research at the John Mayer USDA Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging and Nutrition Immunology Laboratory and has more than 25 years of experience in academics at the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Pre she'll correct me, with an emphasis on enriching teaching, learning, and research in biochemical and human nutrition sciences for their nutrition and dietetics program. Michelle received her her bachelor's in science in biology from Gordon College and her MS and PhD in human nutrition sciences from Tufts University's Freeman School of Nutrition Science and Policy in Boston, Massachusetts. Please join me in welcoming Michelle. She's been a tremendous advocate for these programs, and I think will provide a tremendous overview today.
Thank you, Dr. Fleischhacker, for that kind introduction, and thank you all for attending and for your interest in NIFA's portfolio of education grants. Our education portfolio of grants is designed to improve scientific and agricultural literacy, to recruit, train, and equip students with needed skills to face the workforce, to promote greater learning and engagement through improved instruction and teacher training, to advance science by supporting more inclusive graduate and postdoctoral training in critical research fields, and also to strengthen educational capacity at minority serving institutions and non-land grant colleges of agriculture through instruction, curricular, and educational infrastructure. Next, please. Next slide, please. We often speak of pipelines for education and workforce development and getting the future workforce engaged at an early age for recruitment into critical need areas, such as food, diet, nutrition, and health. Our focus today will be on higher education grant opportunities at the undergraduate and graduate levels that support human nutrition workforce development. Next. Some of these grant opportunities are part of NIFA's flagship Agriculture and Food Research Initiative, or AFRI grants. We will focus on the education and workforce development, undergraduate and graduate programs in blue, and mention some opportunities through the foundational and applied science programs toward the end. Next, please. The AFRI education and workforce development programs are focused on development of the next generation of research, education, and extension outreach professionals in the food and agricultural sciences, including human nutrition. Next. Let us use a needs-based approach as our new perspective when considering grant opportunities that best fit. Next. In preparing students for specific jobs in human nutrition and dietetics, let us first consider our learners and our educators. Who are your current students? Are they traditional or non-traditional? What are their particular needs? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? In contemplating these things, we will be better able to meet the needs, address the weaknesses, and share their strengths. Who are your current educators? Are your faculty new recruits, or are they seasoned faculty members with much experience? Once again, assessing their needs, weaknesses, and strengths will allow us to better prepare potential applications for grants that will help address these needs. Next. In addition to learners and educators, let us consider institutional capacity and partners or collaborators. In terms of your current capacity within your department or your college or your institution, do you have sufficient equipment and materials? What is the status of your support personnel? And partners, with whom are you collaborating? Do you have partners in academia, other academic institutions, perhaps even nonprofits? Are you working with industry or government? Or are you working with hospitals and clinics? Next, please. In thinking ahead, I would like you to try to think about your educational need areas, and we will consider that learner-teacher interface as well as the institutional capacity partner interface to really try to identify which grant programs can best meet your needs where you are at in your institution and in the process of developing the future workforce in nutrition and health sciences. So by looking at some of these opportunities, you may be able to plan 5, 10, 15, or even 20 years into the future about successive applications to these kinds of grant programs to help you grow and meet those needs as you grow. Next, please. Let us first consider that learner-educator interface. Next. The educational need areas are in blue in the center. And first, let's think about the need for student recruitment and retention. Sheila mentioned the need for increasing enrollment that many of you had expressed, or many participants had expressed in a recent meeting. Or might there be needs for curriculum design, or design of a certificate or degree program, development of specific materials, or reinforcing the resources available at the library or through instructional delivery systems? If these educational need areas have hit the button for you, then you could consider these following grant programs. HEC is the Higher Education Challenge Grants Program with very broad eligibility. MSP is the Higher Education Multicultural Scholars Program. That is a specific scholarship program focused on reaching the underrepresented, underserved students and bringing them into the profession. HSI, our Hispanic Serving Institution Education Grants Program, which of course would require your institution to be designated as an HSI. And the last on the list here, the NLGCA, the Capacity Building Grants for Non-Land Grant Colleges of Agriculture, also offers these educational need areas, but your institution would need to be certified as an NLGCA through NIFA. Let's continue to consider additional educational need areas. Next. Here, we're going to add on specialized experiential learning. This can be in research, it could be in education or community outreach and engagement. It could be through internships, apprenticeships, field or laboratory experiences, shadowing, or global engagement. More and more of you are getting involved in the future education model by the Accreditation Agency for Nutrition and Dietetics, ASCEND, the Accreditation Council for Education in Nutrition and Dietetics. And you're getting into the competency-based education and needing perhaps to add value onto knowledge to show or have the students do certain things or have these skill sets. So you may need to add experiential learning onto some of your courses, or include a certain number of hours in a specific rotation to meet those needs while they're still undergraduates. You may need to address need areas of critical thinking, problem solving, leadership, decision-making that are many times listed as well under multiple courses in terms of the development of our future workforce. If these educational need areas resonate with you and your program, please consider the REEU, Research and Extension Experiences for Undergraduates program, which is one of our AFRI programs in the Education and Workforce Development portfolio, as well as the Multicultural Scholars Program that also has an specialized experiential learning component that's optional. In addition, the other three programs already mentioned, the Higher Education Challenge Grants Program, the Hispanic Serving Institution Education Grants Program, as well as the Capacity Building Grants for non-land grant colleges of agriculture programs can also address these. Next, please. Another way I wanted to organize these grants programs were by target audience. So if your target audience is undergraduates, then the REEU, MSP, Higher Education Challenge, or Hispanic Serving Institution Education Grants programs are for you because their focus is on the undergraduate population. If your focus is on graduate students, then you can also consider the Higher Education Challenge grants, the Hispanic Serving Institution Education grants, and I'm adding an additional one here, the Food and Agricultural Sciences National Needs Graduate Fellowship Program, abbreviated NNF. All of these programs are designed for the institution to prepare the grant proposal and have project directors as faculty members. A little later on, I'll give you a couple of differences for graduate programs as well. But please take note of these two different populations. Next, please. Now, in addition to students and learners, let's consider our faculty educators. There may be some needs for professional development or faculty enhancement for teaching, evaluating, advising, or mentoring. There may be some new areas such as nutritional genomics that many seasoned faculty may not have received a lot of training in. Perhaps this is the moment where you could get a grant to have specific training in specific areas to enhance your faculty preparation. In addition, there are need areas with instructional design, support for distance education if certain courses need to be translated from in-person to virtual, and other materials development. Here, the Higher Education Challenge Grants Program, Hispanic Serving Institution Education Grants Program, as well as the NLGCA Capacity Building Grants can all meet these needs here for faculty. Next. Now we're going to move on to that institutional capacity partner interface as we consider our needs assessment. Next. If the educational research and extension outreach need areas include articulation agreements, you need to make an articulation perhaps with a community college to bring in students to your 4-year program, or you want your 4-year program to be articulated to a graduate program. Student exchange, study abroad, gaining those global engagement competencies, collaborative courses and curricula. If somebody else already has a wonderful course developed, might you be able to work with them to have your students take their courses as a part of your program, either as an elective or core, those different things you might want to work out? Or are you in need of equipment or specialized training materials? Are there needs for specialized experiential learning, either as summer internships or rotation hours at industry, labs, farms, nonprofits, hospitals, clinical settings, community settings? If these are your needs, then we have, once again, Higher Education Challenge Grants Program, Hispanic Serving Institution Education Grants Program, the Capacity Building Grants for Non-Land Grant Colleges of Agriculture, and I've added here as well Equipment Grants Program for very large pieces of equipment that could be used and shared in the region. Next, please. And If the institutional capacity partner interface, once again, needs a way for developing or sharing these specialized experiential learning opportunities for students, or being able to connect students with some of these opportunities that perhaps could count for some of their doing and experiential learning. Once again, the research and extension experiences for undergraduates while the students are still undergraduates. And we also have an award that is called the Education Coordinated Network, which is a digital hub that students may be able to click on the different projects that are currently open in a grant cycle and perhaps find different research opportunities. Later on, I can put that link in the chat or in the Q&A box. Next, please. Sometimes it may seem overwhelming and you may wonder, where should we start? Maybe you should start with a conference grant. Bring people together, either to gain specific knowledge or to network and plan, and prepare to submit a larger or a collaborative grant proposal. Is there a need for a specific skill set that perhaps a certificate could be developed? Do you need to get together to talk about evaluation for the accreditation? So many different things. You can use conference grants, and these are available through the Higher Education Challenge Grants Program, the Hispanic Serving Institution Education Grants Program, as well as the NLGCA program for the non-land grants, and the AFRI Foundational and Applied Sciences program, which I mentioned just very briefly, and we're coming back to it right here. Next, please. This foundational and applied sciences request for applications is going to be almost a reversal of thought in terms of finding your very specific niche in the research, and then beneath that area, applying for a conference grant. Because these programs, and there are many, many, many of them, they support research only, extension only, education only, as well as integrated projects, and many of them support conference grants. Next, please. The conference grants for AFRI programs are usually up to $50,000, and I've highlighted 3 programs in those, the letter A with the 4 digits next to it: food safety and defense, diet, nutrition, and the prevention of chronic diseases, and food and human health. Perhaps you are familiar with these programs and think of them primarily as research programs. However, they do offer conference grants and also education only or integrated education with research or education with extension or outreach, and may be viable ways for you to also increase the possibilities of education and workforce development in the food and human nutrition sciences. Next. So this has been our thinking cap time to really consider these educational need areas, what your greatest needs may be. And so now we have some education grant summaries that I will go through very quickly because you will have access to these grants, these slides regarding the grants, and will be able to click directly on the links to access them. Next, please. The Higher Education Challenge Grants Program, or HEC, has the priority to strengthen institutional capacity, including curriculum, faculty. You can get scientific instrumentation, instructional delivery systems, student recruitment and retention, and can also have faculty development as well. And these are education teaching project types. The planning grants or conference grants as well. This planning conference, I should have added that extra word, are up to $30,000 for 2 years. Regular grants up to $150,000, and those are for 3 years. And then there are 2 different types of collaborative grants, depending on the number of institutions. If you have 2 or more institutions, that it's capped at $300,000. If you have 3 or more institutions, at $750,000. Next, the Higher Education Multicultural Scholars Program, once again, is a scholarship program to encourage outstanding students from groups that are historically underrepresented and underserved to pursue and complete a baccalaureate degree in food and ag sciences. It also supports a DVM, but that it's not applicable as much to this audience. There is a experiential learning component which adds $20,000 in addition to the $230,000 for that 5-year project period. So if you need scholarships for outstanding students who wouldn't normally have the opportunity to study nutrition and dietetics, you could develop a scholarship program, include some experiential learning activities for them while they're still undergraduates in their careers. Next. The Research and Extension Experiences for Undergraduates program is one of our primary AFRI education and workforce development programs, once again for undergraduates. And these students receive stipends for experiential learning opportunities, for significant research, extension or community involvement, or education components. And this does not allow tuition, so it's really focused in on that experiential learning. It could be during the summer, it could be during the semester. It depends on the needs and how you develop that. 4-year projects are up to $600,000, 5-year projects up to $750,000, and strengthening grants are also allowed, as well as standard. And if time allows, we could talk about that in the questions. Next, please. The Hispanic Serving Institution Education Grants Program. Once again, the institution should be an HSI serving 25% or more percent of Hispanics as their student population. And this, as you have seen, covers the curricular innovative teaching and education, as well as student development. It covers undergraduate as well as graduate students, and is to build capacity as well as develop the workforce. They have education teaching projects and a relatively new project called community development. And their conference grants are now $50,000. And there is a conference data grant for someone who has been a prior recipient for up to $100,000. Regular grants up to $400,000 for 4 years. Bridge grants, which are those that are have not had as much success in the past, a regular kind of grant, but a help for $200,000, and collaborative grants for $1.2 million over 4 years. Next, please. The National Needs Fellows, or Food and Agricultural Sciences National Needs Graduate Fellowship Program, is funding to support new graduate student training and completion of master's or doctoral degrees. So those of you who are interested in supporting students through your master's programs, we know now that the entry-level dietitians must have a master's degree. So this may be an area where you could help support students. $41,000 for master's fellows, $79,500 for doctoral fellows. And then there are special considerations for dissertation travel. And then the combined maximum is not to exceed $262,500. Once again, this is a grant that is initiated by the institution with project directors that are faculty. Next, please. The pre-doctoral fellowship program, as well as the postdoctoral fellowship programs, which will be the next slide, are also in our AFRI and Education and Workforce Development portfolio. These two differ from the NNF graduate program that I just presented, in that the actual pre-doc or postdoctoral fellow is the project director. So these applications are produced directly by the pre-doctoral student or the postdoctoral fellow, and they have a maximum award amount of $180,000 per project for the entire period up to 3 years. Next. And similar to the pre-doctoral fellow, the postdoctoral fellow is to continue specific workforce development to help solve emerging challenges. We know that we need more doctoral terminal degree recipients for nutritional sciences and nutrition and human sciences. So this might be a great opportunity for many. Maximum of $225,000 per project for a period of up to 2 years. Next, please. The capacity building grants for non-land grant colleges of agriculture, or NLGCA, requires the institution to be certified as an NLGCA, which means they are not a land grant institution, but they do offer a 4-year degree program or higher in one of 32 different fields of study, and they include food science. And so if your institution is already designated an NLGCA, you could apply. If you think you might be eligible, you can apply for certification to later apply for this grant program. It does have 4 different grant or project types. The planning conference grants up to $30,000 for 2 to 3 years, regular grants for $150,000, collaborative joint $300,000, and large scale comprehensive initiative $750,000. And these do support a wide variety of those need areas that we've covered. Next. The equipment grants program is for specialized equipment between $25,000 and $250,000, or $250,000 to $500,000, and they're only equipment projects. Year 1 is acquisition and operation, and year 2 through 4 evaluation of impacts and outcomes. So it's one piece of shared use, special purpose equipment, and it includes data science and data systems. So depending on your need area, this could be helpful. Next, please. I believe we're coming to the end. Thank you so much for your kind attention. And I really hope that this new perspective of focusing in on educational need areas, doing a needs assessment, has helped you better insert perhaps yourself or your department or your institution into our education portfolio for developing the future nutrition professional workforce. Thank you once again. And Sheila, let's go back to you.
Well, please join me in thanking Dr. Shelsky Santos for really an informative overview. And as I mentioned at the top, her passion for advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility within our nutritional sciences workforce, and also advocating for nutrition supports within the broader agricultural sciences workforce efforts. Here, you can see at NIFA, we have a variety of supports, but it does take, I think, some help to navigate what's the best fit for you. So please, as she's emphasizing here, here is her email and also her program specialist. I did note in the chat, we'll make sure her slides are available on our event page, but also feel free to just email me if limiting the emails in her inbox to get a copy of the full deck today, as hopefully we've given you a lot of food for thought and can get you started. Now with Michelle's help, we're going to transition to 2 grantee spotlights today. And that is a fun part for us at NIFA, is to really showcase the work and really hopefully highlight their lessons learned and navigating NIFA, and really showcasing how they've used these supports to really advance diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility within their higher educational supports. Please, again, use the Zoom question and answer function. If you have any questions today for today's presenters, we will try to answer all of those live. And if not, we will circle back with Q&As with all registered participants. Today, for our grantee spotlights, we're going to start with the University of Arkansas, and this is going to be represented by Dr. Melanie Hingle. I've known Dr. Hingle for, I think, over 15 years. She's a professor and associate school director within the School of Nutritional Sciences and Wellness in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at the University of Arizona. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Hingle, and again, appreciate her and Dr. Garcia joining us today from the Pacific Standard Time Zone.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Perfect. Okay. Thanks again to Dr. Shelsky Santos and Dr. Fleischhacker. And I'm at the University of Arizona. It's at Tucson. And I think this is the fun part of the webinar for me as well, because I get to talk about all the great stuff we've been doing in collaboration with folks across campus at University of Arizona. So thanks again for the invite. I want to tell you about our Multicultural Scholars Program. And this grant was a 5-year grant, and it began in 2019 and concluded last year, or very, very early this year. And I'll take you on a tour, but the motivation of this was really, we observed about maybe 10 years ago or so that our nutritional sciences students were out in the community doing work. We got feedback from our community partners that there's some things that weren't quite part of the curriculum and a training that might help them be more community engaged and understanding sort of the context of the work that they were engaged in as students, and also future as health professionals. So we saw this need, and therefore, in addition to diet, of course, being a really important part of health, in fact, if you impact on that, you can significantly impact on your risk of chronic disease. So combined with that, we thought, okay, this is a good topic. Culinary medicine is a good topic to focus on. And I will define that for you. Next slide, please. Before I get into this, I think I defined, but the culinary medicine is the integration of culinary techniques with nutrition science in a way that is budget conscious, culturally responsive, context aware of the things that people are dealing with in everyday life. So we felt like our students weren't quite getting that. And that was really the purpose of this training grant, was to bring these things together in a curriculum, in experiential learning, in research, to help our undergraduate students graduate prepared to work at this intersection of nutrition, food, and human health. So that really was the goal here, you can see. And our objective with this training grant, again, undergraduate training grant, was to recruit highly qualified scholars. These are scholars who identify as a racial ethnic minority, support them in meeting their program requirements, developing their leadership competencies. That was really important as well, professional competencies, engaging them in experiential learning with the community. And finally, this is a pipeline program, so really important to us was to prepare them for graduate or professional school if they wish to go. Next slide. Thank you. And so again, I defined this for you. This is really, culinary medicine is kind of an emerging It's been around for a while, but it's been defined more by physicians in the medical space as kind of a teaching tool for physicians to help them get introduced to nutrition through food. Absolutely, this is fantastic. We need our physicians to be more engaged with nutrition. This was really it took that culinary knowledge and nutrition knowledge, but it really took an extra step in terms of understanding also the context and the time constraints people face and diet and cultural beliefs and practices. And then of course, budget being really important since food and nutrition security is a struggle for a lot of people, a challenge. Next slide, please. So in creating this program, we had some eligibility criteria. And again, these were undergraduate students that we were reaching out to, recruiting, who were majoring in our nutritional sciences program or nutrition and food systems program. This supported them the last 2 years of their program. And so they had to be a rising junior in order to be eligible and identify as a racial ethnic minority. We lowered the minimum GPA. We had it originally at 3, and then after discussing with our advisors and other programs on campus, thought 2.5 was more appropriate. It still means the students were doing just fine in their coursework, but would expand the eligibility to people who might not normally be a part of that eligibility pool. You have to be a U.S. citizen to be part of this because of federal rules. And then, of course, they had to commit to completing all program requirements. Next slide, please. This gives you a snapshot of a typical time in program for students. So our last cohort, we recruited people in 2 different cohorts of 4 each, was recruiting, accepting applications through December of 21. We screened and did interviews with finalists and selected them in spring around March, and then they engaged in the fall. They began their program. We had a couple of formal courses that we wanted the students to take, including culinary medicine courses that we created for this program, and as well a entrepreneurial leadership program that's offered through our agriculture education program. We felt that, again, that helped formally develop some leadership skills. There was a workshop as well that we had them complete. This went on for a couple of years, and then during the summer was their research experience. And that was with a program called UROC, Undergraduate Research and Outreach Consortium at the University of Arizona. And that supports students who want to get into research, to be exposed to research, to be placed in a lab with a research mentor all over campus, depending on their area of interest. This was in nutrition or nutrition in adjacent topics. And they did that for the summer and learned how to write abstracts and present oral presentations and got a lot out of it. And that usually was one of the students' most valuable activities, according to the students at the end. They really loved that. And then part of that was a graduate school preparatory workshop where they got first exposed to sort of what kinds of things they need to think about in putting together their application for graduate or professional school. And then finally, topping all that off, we had targeted one-on-one advising sessions with our academic advisors. Now, students are, of course, seeing academic advisors anyway, but we felt that there was an additional level of kind of intensity that was needed just to make sure they were supported. We also had regular meetings with them, once or twice a semester to get everybody together so they meet one another. Next slide, please. This part was particularly exciting. That this grant helped not only the students, but it helped us create stronger collaborations within and outside of our institution. And so Arizona Cooperative Extension was a very strong partner. We have a 4-H program called Tucson Village Farm. We have a SNAP-Ed program called the Garden Kitchen. Our students were placed there for experiential learning. We have a federally qualified health center colleagues. And so the students went to El Rio Community Health Center to shadow dietitians there and physicians and do cooking programs. Our regional community food bank was a partner, and our University of Arizona dining services, they have a cooking on campus program for students, and our students led many of those food demos and were part of the education. And then in addition to that, I mentioned already, our faculty research mentors were really critical to helping students with their research projects. Our entrepreneurial leadership expertise was critical in developing those professional skills and soft skills that were really important. And then finally, for reasons I'll reveal in just a moment, the U of A Libraries became a major colleague of ours as well. And then, of course, the Graduate College in the preparation work for graduate and professional school. Next slide, please. I was asked to describe some of our challenges. Well, the biggest challenge, as you might imagine, given the time frame, was that the pandemic happened, and this really curtailed face-to-face meetings we had planned and travel that the students we had budgeted for. Communication and coordination was a challenge at first until we got our feet under us. And then, of course, coordinating community experiences during this time was challenging as well. And then challenging for other reasons, because when you have course credit tied in with an experience, that gets a little complicated sometimes. But we were able to surmount these challenges and then actually pivot from the lack of face-to-face meetings and travel and do some other things that I'll describe in just a moment. And things that we learned here, we learned that students really wanted more opportunities for social and networking. That was really helpful. They became quite a tight cohort altogether and helped one another. It was really great to see that. They thought a major selling point was that research experience and the fact that people were helping them get ready for graduate school and professional ed and having that pathway be very clear, which it often is not. Working with faculty and working with the community was the best, according to the students. And then finally, I think this is a selling point as well. Even if you're not going on to graduate or professional school, but all of our 8 scholars did, it still helps to have experiences that help you tell your story to future employers. And they really felt that was very valuable. Next slide, please. And so during our 5-year grant, we were able to recruit our scholars, and in addition, utilize the funding with our program officer's approval, the funding that we couldn't use for travel and some of the face-to-face events, to recruit additional short-term scholars. These are scholars who helped us. They completed a 6-month training that was focused on creating, and they were co-authors of content for an open education resource in culinary medicine. So we wrote a textbook together. And let me tell you, that was a significant undertaking. And it is a free open source textbook. It will be published at the very end of this calendar year. It's in the copy editing phase right now. And it was quite an effort. So our faculty and students paired up and wrote this book together. So that was great that we could offer paid stipends and training to these students and utilize these grants monies in a way that still was addressing the target audience and engaging and helping students get professional experience. Of course, we supported them in their academic program requirements. They completed these leadership and professional competencies. They got to do all the experiential learning I described, and then all of them went on to graduate or professional school. One of the scholars is a master's student working with me right now. Next slide. And so finally, impacts, we were able to recruit 20 students, which was fantastic. It was way more than we thought we'd have an impact on originally. The more intensive 2-year scholars program was this integrated training and research, experiential and service learning and outreach, which we still have the framework for now, and we're putting students through this. It's not funded by USDA, but it's the bones are still there. The framework is still there and at the core of what we do in our school. And we have these other scholars, these 12 other scholars who came in and did this work with us that helped us create a textbook that's now free for our students in these courses to use and anyone in the world. So if you want a link to it when it's ready to go at the end of this year, January, let me know. Next slide, please. And finally, I want to conclude with recommendations. If you're thinking of applying to this mechanism, yes, please. It is fantastic. I can't speak highly enough about it. We've had several training grants from the USDA and been fortunate to do that. And this one has been my favorite for a lot of reasons. And I think maybe because it works with undergraduate students, there was this clear need that we filled. But I encourage you, if you are coming up with something, make sure it's building on the strengths and interests of students, first of all, gaps of your faculty colleagues. Don't just make something if it's not something that they're going to get behind. And of course, stakeholders in the community, if it's going to be community engaged. I would also encourage you to think about sustainability at the very beginning. How will you sustain this program beyond the life of the grant? That is always a challenge for any sponsored project. And certainly for this, it's no different. So we had to think hard about what kinds of philanthropic funding made sense to continue, for stipends or what kinds of things could be kind of brought into the structure of the academic programs in our unit and experiential learning that's already going on to kind of maintain some of that focus without the extramural funding. I think the interdisciplinary focus we had was a strength. The experiential learning was a strength. It helped students tell the story, what they learned in a very realistic way. And then finally, we were able to extend the pipeline of trained professionals beyond undergraduate to the graduate path. We had high school students in 4-H involved at some of our sites. And then again, that beyond we had physicians and dietitians and people in the community working with our students. So it really helped them see the whole spectrum and the whole pipeline from the beginning to the end. And I think that's it for me. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer any questions after this as part of the panel.
Well, Dr. Hingle, that was a fantastic, concise overview of a journey you and your students had, and I'm sure they loved being with faculty and the community. So great to hear some of their highlights and anecdotes personally, and just really to hear the overall impacts and ability to transition during COVID that your team did. So we're going to take questions after we hear from Dr. Garcia. So please feel free, if you have questions for Dr. Hingle, please use the Zoom Q&A. We will take those after we hear from our next grantee deep dive, Dr. Garcia. Dr. Garcia is joining us today from California State University, Long Beach. She or I might refer to it shortly as CSU. At CSU, Dr. Garcia is an assistant professor in the Department of Health Sciences. She also directs the Center for Latino Community Health Evaluation and Leadership Training. Please join me today in welcoming Dr. Garcia. And she's going to follow a similar format as Dr. Hingle in terms of giving a deep dive on her higher education supports.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share with you today about my projects. So I'm going to try to give an overview of 4 funded projects throughout the year in this presentation. So I will definitely take questions at the end. The title of the presentation is Cal State Long Beach's Efforts to Address Shortages in Nutrition Professionals. In terms of the background, we know that high rates of nutrition-related chronic diseases in Hispanics require effective health promotion and also culturally proficient nutrition and health workforce. Unfortunately, there is a lack of Latinos and other minorities in the FAN professions. The reason that there's a shortage is because there's really low awareness among high school students and also community college students about the FAN careers. And oftentimes they don't enroll in these majors. When they do enroll at the undergraduate level, there's very few students from minority groups, first gen to college, for example, that will actually pursue advanced degrees. They often feel like once I have my bachelor's, that's it, and I'm going to go into work, but they don't realize how many opportunities there is to go beyond the 4 years. For that reason, the CSULB Center for Latino Health aims to increase the number of Latinos and other minority groups pursuing FAN professions by providing students with funded experiential learning opportunities, mentorship, professional development, and also independent research opportunities. We have been very fortunate to receive funding from the USD since 2007 for different types of projects. So I'm going to try to share a little bit about each of these. Next slide, please. In terms of project goals that pertain to this webinar, we emphasize Latino nutrition for chronic disease prevention via various high-impact practices into our programs, such as implementing workshops, learning communities, leadership and professional skill development, applied faculty-mentored research, and community-based externships. Another common goal in our grants is to increase the pool of qualified health and nutrition professionals to enter the workforce to prevent and address chronic conditions among Latinos in California. Objectives related to these goals are to train fellows in research methods. We often train for a 1 solid week before they actually go out to do their experiential learning. The research training includes qualitative methods, ethical practices, science communication, study design. After they engage in experiential learning through health promotion and other types of research, such as clinical research or literature reviews, we provide fellows with tailored mentorship, not only from their faculty mentors, but also from the PIs on the studies. We provide tailored career guidance to explore graduate programs, to hear from their near peers, someone who's in a master program, someone who's in a PhD. That way they can find out about just different opportunities and different career paths. And we also provide students with professional development opportunities through preparation of abstracts, posters, and presentations. Next slide, please. Okay, so Andale is our longest lasting project. This is an AFRI REEU funded project for undergraduates. So the educational need areas that we addressed from the grant proposal was priority area 3, which is food safety, nutrition, and health, to promote research and extension learning experiences for undergraduates. So again, we are not a land-grant institution. We don't focus on other USD priority areas. We're really focused on nutrition and health. Our LINK program is actually an HSI education grants program. This is our collaboration project with 5 institutions total. So the educational need area that we addressed was providing students with exceptional curricular and co-curricular experiential learning opportunities to promote persistence, retention, and timely graduation for undergraduates as well as graduates. Lastly, our Eat, Play, Go and our Harvesting Healthy projects. These are 2 called integrated projects funded by the USDA, where we focus on education, research, and extension. The education piece focuses on training students, just like our other education training programs. In this mechanism, we focused on AFRI Priority 3, which is food safety, nutrition, and health, and specifically Area 3C that looks at diet, nutrition, and the prevention of chronic diseases. Next slide, please. In terms of our target population, we started off with our undergraduate Andale program, and it really has evolved since our 2016 when we had that first funding. We actually do outreach to community college students. This is open to any major. We're trying to get awareness out about the FAN careers through our LINK program. For undergraduates in Andale, as well as Eat, Play, Go, and Harvesting, they have to have a declared major in nutrition, health science, and kinesiology, a minimum of a 3.0 GPA. We have also considered lower GPAs depending on circumstances. Oftentimes, if you're a transfer student, you may have done well. So we do take those things into consideration. For graduate students involved in LINK, Eat, Play, Go, and Harvesting, same majors, GPA has to be at least a 3.2, which is a little bit lower than even what our entry GPAs are. We also make it a point to prioritize underrepresented students in the FAN workforce. We do have different rankings and give additional priority to those that are first generation of college, non-traditional students, and students with disabilities. For our intervention projects, Eat, Play, Go, and Harvesting, we also recruit half of the students to be Spanish speakers because our intervention work is done with Latino communities. Oftentimes, parents and grandparents speak only Spanish. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a busy slide, but it's exciting to share with you. We have many collaborators. At Cal State Long Beach, we operate under the College of Health and Human Services through the Center for Latino Health. And in the college, we have the Department of Nutrition and Dietetics, KIN, and Public Health and Health Science. So we actually have built strong relationships with all these departments and different faculty who serve as mentors for our Andale project. And then for LINK, our HSI education grant program, which is a collaboration between 2 institutions, Cal State Long Beach and Cal State Fullerton, we actually have a collaboration of 5 Hispanic institutions, 2 four-year colleges, and 3 community colleges. From what we learned from Andale, we realized that we had to start a little earlier and work with community colleges. So we expanded out that way, and we do different activities with them. At the bottom of the slide, I shared just an idea of those places where our students go out to do externships. So local health departments, medical centers, FQHCs, and of course a community garden where we do our gardening intervention. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little more detail about the student-focused projects, since I'm kind of giving a broad overview, our Andale Research Training Program is actually ending next year. We recruited 50 undergraduates to gain experiential learning and professional development experiences, as well as mentorship. This is we call this our short-term 9-week experience, 1 week in the summer, then they go on to do research in the fall with a mentor for 8 weeks. We have been very successful at having students actually stay on with faculty past the 8 weeks. And because we had cost savings from COVID, students were actually paid to continue with faculty mentors. So that's been very exciting to see. And then for leveraging interdisciplinary nutritional knowledge, our LINK project, we expanded to the 5 HSI campus collaboration, where we do awareness talks at community colleges regarding the FAN careers and also the programs available at our campuses for students to come in and be a part of. So this is a very exciting opportunity. 26 transfer students from community colleges were selected for a 12-month research experience that paid tuition. So Andale is an REEU, it doesn't pay tuition. LINK is a HSI education project, pays tuition. So this is 12-month more extensive experience where students did the same. They got their week training, a year-long research experience, and then a summer externship, which was really helpful to them. Next slide, please. Here is our integrated projects, Harvesting Healthy Habits and Eat, Play, Go. Eat, Play, Go is actually, we have an extension now, but it was supposed to end this November. So our integrated projects, again, the focus area for these is education, research, and extension. So the education piece is where we train students. The students are selected for usually about 1 year. We found that to be a good amount of time before students move on to something else. For Eat, Play, Go, we recruited 12 students, undergrad and graduate students, to work together through a paid fellowship to develop, implement, and evaluate an obesity intervention that focuses on nutrition and physical activity for Latino families. Through this opportunity, they work in interdisciplinary teams to develop curriculum, to implement, to problem solve, and then they get to work with the data. Similarly, our newest project is Harvesting Healthy Habits. This is a nutrition, education, and gardening project. We recruit 16 students for this one. We are just starting our intervention. Students get paid fellowships, again, to develop, implement, and evaluate. So this is a super effective way for students to just come out of these programs feeling super prepared and confident. Our undergraduates work with graduate students, so that's also very helpful. And here's a picture of our students in the garden. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of challenges and lessons learned, so of course, COVID was a challenge. We moved to virtual programming. Students were not able to spend their travel money, but again, we used it for research hours. We do observe quite a bit of mental health and life challenges that require attention and problem solving for our students. So we have been able to accommodate some to stay within the program. And then a major challenge, of course, is finances for students. So we know that providing financial support really helps retention and also accountability to the work that the students are doing. In terms of lessons learned across the years, we realized that short-term research experiences like Andale allow students the flexibility to try research and see if it's something for them. They're in their junior, senior year, they decide, okay, I like this, I like my mentor, I like what I'm doing, I'm now going to apply to a graduate degree. That happens very often. The longer research experiences, like the integrated projects and the LINK project, really provide students with knowledge, confidence, and skills. After this, they feel competent to apply for graduate school or employment after graduations. We often hear from students that say, you know, all of the skills I learned directly apply to my job. I'm doing really well. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Other lessons learned, there's a need for ongoing mentorship for students, not just with their research mentor, but also for the PIs in the projects to make sure that we're able to problem solve. And then lastly, the USDA's flexibility with student training completion is so important and so valuable. Rules have changed a little bit, and we've been seeing that through the different RFAs, but the most recent RFAs say, you know, you should be able to accommodate students' life happening. So a baby, an accident, you know, death in the family, we are able to allow students some flexibility to finish fellowships, and that's been super helpful for them. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of accomplishments, we're just so excited to share that the Center for Latino Health provided a total of $350,000 in funding for students in the last fiscal year. That really just showed how productive our research center is in training students. We provide the most opportunities for students in our entire college. People often send students here to gain this valuable research experience. When students leave here, they're also more likely to be hired by other faculty because they've received all of the training. So with this, we have accomplished high recruitment, retention, and success rates for our students. And we've also established an annual research symposium to highlight all of the work students are doing across projects at our week of research. Also, we've been able to develop our 9-week Andale program to introduce students to research. So this is kind of our intro project. We've had over 80 students go through Andale in the last 2 funding cycles. We've established long-standing collaborations with more than 10 faculty at CSULB. And through Andale, we were able to develop study protocols and student learning evaluation and tracking best practices. These study protocols and best practices, I feel, have really made us competitive for the recent funding. So the best practices from Andale then allowed us to apply for LINK. where we were able to establish now not a one campus, but now we have a 5-campus collaboration and also reaching community college students. And we've been able to also retain our mentors. Lastly, through Eat, Play, Go, and Harvesting Healthy Habits, which are our integrated projects, we've been able to provide more than 30 students with intensive field experience. We've developed 2 innovative multi-session obesity prevention interventions that are bilingual. We've established interdisciplinary teams of students from nutrition and public health and kin to work together to develop curriculum, which works wonders because they all come in with different knowledge and insights to curriculum development. And then we've been able to establish long-term collaborations with local partners for our intervention planning. Next slide, please. So in terms of impact, we know that involving underrepresented students as USDA trainings has definitely increased awareness of FAN careers and preparedness for graduate school. Over 100 students received funding and training at CCOB in the last years, and over 500 community college students became aware just this last year through our LINK project. We work with 3 faculty liaisons and peer ambassadors. We know that engaging students in training supports student retention and timely graduation. So in terms of the impact, 98% of the students were retrained across programs and had timely graduation, and about 80% reported plans to pursue graduate school. Lastly, and I think most importantly, training and supporting racial and ethnic minority students increases the number of highly trained, confident, culturally competent nutrition and health professionals. This impact is, I think, for me, the most important because they will go out into the field and be able to provide effective culturally tailored nutrition counseling to Latinos because they've learned this through their programs. The public health students can develop public health professional programs through their skills in behavior theories and nutrition education. But most importantly, increasing the numbers through these programs really will help to diversify nutrition and health professionals because it lays a foundation for other students to follow in the paths of near peers, faculty, and community partners. We have definitely seen the impact on students who are undergrads who never considered a graduate program working with grads and PhDs. Next slide, please. So in terms of recommendations, it's very important to include high impact practices that work to engage and retain students. Things like interdisciplinary teams, cohort models, focus areas, retention, things that are engaging, I think are very helpful. Budgeting for student travel, highly recommended. Monitoring student progress at all times to make sure you identify barriers early. And then hiring committed staff who enjoy student mentorship. It isn't for everyone. Networking with faculty and staff from your campus to identify effective researchers and mentors. If a mentor isn't working out, not engaging, not really good with the students, then we don't involve them for the next grant. Also, networking and connecting with successful PDs from other universities to gain insight to methods, planning, and evaluation practices. I just came back from a meeting in Kansas City and I learned so many ideas about things that I could potentially apply into a next program. In terms of grant writing, make sure to provide sufficient details related to student recruitment, engagement, and retention. I have not been awarded funding because I wasn't as detailed. I knew what I was doing, I just didn't tell them, right? So very important to include detail. And then lastly, identify areas for potential challenges and describe how they will be addressed so that they feel confident that you are able to address them, that you've thought ahead about what those issues may be. And I believe I'm over time, so thank you so much for listening to my presentation.
Dr. Garcia, that was a wonderful overview. Thank you so much for joining. I know Dr. Hingle and you are both coming from, in between class schedules to join us today. And I think, again, just hearing live your experiences and being able to take questions are so valuable to our attendees. So again, great gratitude to both of you for all the work you've done and then also for coming live today. So I'm going to make sure everybody is in gallery view. Just give me a second here. We have some questions that have already come in, but I encourage anybody who has questions to feel free to use the Zoom QA to ask them. Feel free to use shout outs or share your success stories. We're always happy to use the Zoom QA to hear more about successes or barriers in this space. So it doesn't always have to just be questions. We're going to wrap up at 4:30. So we'll be pretty rapid with getting through the questions today, but feel free, just because we're short on time, doesn't mean we can't take your question. So feel free to put it in there we don't get to it live, we'll work across the panel team and make sure you get the questions through all our registered participants. So I want to start with you, Michelle. Some of the questions came in that you answered live, but for the benefit of the full group, I want to make sure folks have that. So one of the questions coming in right away was asking about, is it likely that a program or a student, depending on the funding mechanism, would be competitive for these opportunities if not based at a land grant or an institution with robust food system research or no College of Ag? So Michelle, could you please take that one?
Sure. I think the most important thing is for you to be a student of the request for application, a student of the RFA. Each program does have specific eligibility requirements, but there are several with very wide eligibility requirements, such as higher education challenge and research and extension experiences for undergraduates. And those can go to even private institutions, nonprofits, and so you don't have to be a College of Agriculture. And Dr. Garcia, I believe, even mentioned that, her programs have been focused on nutrition and public health, that, they're not connected to a specific ag program at her institution. So I hope that through hearing the success stories, you've also seen it in action, that you can be very successful if you have a good grant application.
Thank you, Michelle. And again, I really just want to encourage, reaching out to Michelle, reaching out to Christian, like reach out to our program officer. So Michelle covers a wide portfolio, but she doesn't cover everything. So as she detailed the relevant programs today, or as you find others at NIFA, normally on that program page is a point of contact. Feel free to email them directly. Sometimes it is the program's leader's name directly, or sometimes they have a general mailbox. Please don't be shy. Even if you kind of clearly read like, oh, I don't think I'm eligible for this one, they're usually going to be that 15-minute call with them. Like, it's going to be helpful for you to efficiently go through our more than 70 funding opportunities. So sometimes it's just worth that email or that call. You can also email awardees, right? So you can use our grant system and kind of track down, who's gotten these awards in the past, and you could reach out to them. So like feedback Dr. Garcia gave you, that like, I knew what I was doing, I just didn't provide the detail, right? So sometimes you can tell from these awardees, and they've gone through submissions, multiple sometimes, really what folks are looking for with these grants. So sometimes it's just really worth chatting with the program staff, but also chatting with awardees. And as Michelle has included in the appendix materials you'll get in today's slides, we can't recommend enough serving on our panel reviews. Reviewing these grants or relevant grants in this space, I think, is so invaluable in terms of learning who's successful and what are common pitfalls of not making your application competitive in this space. So sometimes we're trained very much as researchers, and we kind of forget it's a different language to really elevate our research and or extension pieces that we need to be competitive for these projects. So applying, obviously, go for it, but also serving on these panel reviews is going to be really helpful as you learn to be competitive in the process for these higher education supports. Being mindful of the time, I want to kind of pull up another question that came in that Michelle answered live. And this was regarding faculty salaries and if and how that's integrated into some of these grant supports. So Michelle, you want to take that one?
Sure. I would say that quite a few of the programs would allow some kind of compensation for faculty, particularly if you have a 9-month appointment and you don't usually work in the summers, you can get summer support. But even if you do have a 12-month appointment, you may be able to buy out a course so that you'll have time to commit to some of these programs, because I can empathize. I've been there, that full teaching load, and yeah, I'm supposed to be sleeping or doing something right now, but I'm writing a grant or so yes, I think that there are opportunities. So please do look for those in the RFAs and reach out to the national program leaders.
Thank you, Michelle. And Drs. Garcia and Hingle, do you guys want to weigh in just in terms of like really thinking through budgeting accordingly for the faculty and staff time? I know Dr. Garcia lifted up, like, make sure you hire the right people as an important piece. So want to ask for your input on kind of not only the budgeting part, but also the hiring part here for the appropriate faculty and staff supports. Dr. Garcia, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I can start. So the REEU undergraduate grant, I think, does even list a restriction. So you can't go above a certain amount % time for faculty. So definitely less time is allowed, maybe like 8% or something across an entire year. So you have to think strategically about what you're doing and what's going to be feasible. For the integrated projects that are the education, research, and extension, I have been able to buy out of only one course out of many for only one semester. So there is a little more time, but because you're not only doing education with students, you're actually doing research and implementation. So definitely very important. I usually hire students who graduated, who have returned for graduate degrees as coordinators, because they know exactly what's happening. They can speak to the program and then just really serve as role models. So that's always very helpful as well.
And
Yeah,
Dr. Hingle,
Sure, I'll add to that. The Multicultural Scholars Program grant also has restrictions, and there's a cost of education allowance, but nobody's salary is included. And so being very strategic about the involvement of everybody and upfront, pretty clear about the time commitment and what is expected of each team member is very important so that nobody feels later like they're having to do work for free, or we don't allow cost shares usually in our unit and in our college. And so that kind of a thing is just, it's got to be rolled into your teaching somehow, or sponsored project work.
I
And
do
the
also
one-
want to just add one more thing. For mentors, for our smaller projects, they don't get any payment. For the Link larger project, I think you saw collaboration projects are up to 1 million. We do give them stipends. Not a lot of money, but just as a thank you for, I think it's like for $500 for a year is what they get. So just to show them appreciation.
And this is great. And again, this is really why you want to really look at the funded projects and see the things that they're doing to give you food for thought. As Dr. Garcia said, like, networking is so important in this stage. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. You want to kind of know what works. And as both of our presenters highlighted today, students evolved during COVID and they're evolving, with the technology and stuff like that. So what might have worked for you as an undergrad or as you were mentoring undergrads might be very different as we kind of think through the pipeline development going forward. So, that's really important to kind of think through, like, even though something might have worked 4 years ago, it might be very different in kind of a post-COVID context. So very much encourage you to reach out to awardees and those who are in the thick of doing this work and kind of thinking through ways to propose your projects going forward. I want to be mindful of time. And one of the questions that got asked was really asking, like, how we know there's like declining enrollment in the nutritional sciences. And as I mentioned at the top of the hour, I was just at the joint meeting for nutrition department heads and program leads and also food sciences. And we had a presentation from the accreditation body for the Academy for Nutrition and Dietetics. So I put that ACED, I think I'm saying it right, ACEND. So it's the accrediting body for kind of nutrition and dietetic pathway. And they conduct surveys, really kind of asking through, really with a dietetics lens, where we're at. They've made some changes, particularly now requiring a master's and a registered dietitian pathway to be credentialed. And so we are seeing, and that's what was being discussed last week by the department heads, we are seeing declines. Sometimes it might be within a program that maybe had 20, now you have 18. So, but when it's collectively happening across the country, where Michelle is saying, hey, we need nutritional sciences, as we know, diet-related diseases are the leading causes of diseases. They're preventable, solvable, and we think nutrition professionals can play a key role. So we're dealing with that out of balance situation. We'll probably have in calendar year 2025, as our work with WIC Workforce develops, a deep dive, particularly within WIC and the work we're doing there to increase cultural competencies within the current workforce, but also think through pipeline development. So this topic is very, very timely. So again, I encourage you to go to the Eat Right website and kind of navigate the current charts they have showing enrollment. But even the department heads were kind of challenging it, because sometimes, again, surveys don't always line up with kind of the reality they're dealing with. So that's something, again, NIFA doesn't collect that data directly, but we are kind of hearing from our department heads in both nutrition and food science, kind of a need for increased supports, particularly as we think through integrating diversity, inclusion, accessibility into this work. So please feel free to reach out if you need help navigating that data or have additional questions. So being mindful of wrapping up today, we do have us slotted to 4:30. I do want to start off with a heartfelt thank you again to Michelle, who's really been a leader in advocating for these higher educational supports and really thinking through the role these funding opportunities play and our agency's ability to tackle food and nutrition insecurity, and greatly appreciate Dr. Christian Tobias's partnership. Him and Dr. Zhang have been very zealous in thinking through the workforce development supports. Obviously, they see a lot happening in the nutrition space, but a lot more I think could happen in the years ahead as we think through intersections between tackling food and nutrition insecurity and the workforce development pieces. And now last but not least, I really do want to thank Dr. Melanie Hingle and Dr. Garcia for joining us today. Obviously, you saw just in their short overviews, the snapshots of things they are doing to really build a pipeline here and really make powerful differences with our students. We know at NIFA, our funding supports are often just kind of the catalyst for the work you guys do. So very much appreciate you sharing your story and taking time today to share not only your journey, your team journey, and your students' journey. So please join me in thanking everyone for today's very thought-provoking panel. Again, you will get the slides. Feel free to email me if they're not up fast enough. And then the recording will usually take about 2 weeks just to go through ADA compliance, but very much look forward to using this because part of my job is pretty much weekly talking about these supports and how best to navigate within your universities, how to go about them as well. And then last but not least, I do want to highlight in our webinar series edition, we are hoping to focus a little bit further on what Dr. Hingle talked about just in terms of the rising interest in integrating food and nutrition or food as health or food as medicine, these rising interests in these interventions, and really highlight the NIFA funding opportunities that are relevant here. And as Melanie's showcasing, the relevant projects that we already have that can be translated into action. So very excited. We haven't finalized scheduling that one, probably sometime after the Thanksgiving holiday. And then we have scheduled for January 8th, as you're coming back from your holiday season, a reflection on our last, 4 years, so to speak, under Secretary Vilsack's core priority of tackling food and nutrition security. NIFA will do a reflection on what we've been doing to meet his goal, and then where we hope to go in the future as kind of the administration changes to make sure we sustain this work and momentum. So thank you again for joining us today. I hope all of you guys have a great week. And again, big message from NIFA is reach out early and often to not only our program staff, but our grantees. It does take a village to really build the village we need in this space. So we appreciate everyone collaborating and connecting and hopefully inspiring the work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.